Welcome everyone to Macro Social Work Stories. Today we have a wonderful guest on today, and we want to welcome each of you to our program on today. My name is Dr. Gary Jones, my host, Dr. Steve Burkhart, and we also have Dr. Christine Holmes who will be joining us as well. Today we have a guest who has a wealth of experience working in the community. His name is Dr. Fred Brooks. Mr. Fred Brooks is an associate professor in the School of Social Work at the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies at Georgia State University. His research focuses broadly on issues of poverty and equity in our community. Specifically, his interest is on evaluating community, labor, nonprofit, and governmental interventions designed to decrease poverty and inequities in our communities. Prior to attaining his PhD, Mr. Fred Brooks worked for 10 years with the community organization ACORN. We know that ACORN is the Association of Community Organization for Reform Now. In that process, we're going to talk about a little bit about that as well. He also worked as a clinical social worker for a prison in Louisiana. His practice experience informs his research, his teaching in his MSW program, and we're going to talk about that. So, Dr. Fred Brooks, welcome to Macro Social Work Stories.
Well, thank you, Gary and Steve. Nice to see everybody. I'm delighted y'all selected me to talk today, and I'm happy to explore this journey with y'all.
Yes. So thank you. We welcome you. And today we're just going to begin with our time today. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. A fun, interesting fact that the average person wouldn't know.
The average person wouldn't know that I played a small role in the Georgia Senate runoff campaign last year in helping Senators Ossoff and Warnock get elected in the state of Georgia in the Senate runoff campaign.
Okay. So you played a major role in the Senate campaign, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that because Georgia, we know now we have Miss Stacey Abrams, who's also running again for the governor. So Georgia is on our mind, in the words of a famous philosopher. It's on our mind, and so we're glad for the work that you and many others are doing in Georgia. And so yes, so as we looked at a fun fact about that, as we talk about social work and macro social work. Talk about what led you. Talk about your journey into macro social work.
Okay, I'll try to keep this to 5 minutes.
Okay.
I can't help but go into how I developed a social and economic conscience about economic justice issues, and then how I put it into practice. And again, I need to reveal how old I am. I was born in 1956 in Atlanta, Georgia, during the middle of the Montgomery bus boycott. Okay. I was 11 years old in Atlanta when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. This is just the backdrop to my youth.
Okay.
I would not say that I was politically exposed to all of this, but I was growing up in this milieu, if you will. Nothing much remarkable about my high school education, K through 12, except something that really affected my social conscience in high school was the assigned reading, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. Okay. And that was just a magical piece of art, if you will. And it definitely raised my social conscience. I went to the University of Georgia from 74 to 78. My first semester as a freshman, I changed my major from English to sociology because I had a very dynamic professor, Dr. Joel Horowitz, where essentially it was a critical critique of all the major institutions in the United States, including the economy, the government, the family, religion. Anyway, I was profoundly again, my social and economic conscience about these issues was very much raised. I graduated in 78, stumbled around for basically a year trying to find what I was looking for. In October of 1979, I saw an ad in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. For the youngsters out there, in the old days, the way you found a job was looking in the newspaper for job ads. There was no Indeed or anything like that. No cell phones, no internet. I opened up the paper, and the activist ad was obviously one of the first ads in the paper, alphabetical order. And it said, "Would you like a job helping low and moderate income people build power in the community?" I answered that ad. It was for a canvas job, going door to door raising money for Acorn.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when I heard that, I said, I have no idea if I can do this or not. I was kind of scared of the job,
Mm-hmm.
but I knew I wanted to work for social change.
Mm-hmm.
I took the job in October of '79, and I worked there for 10 years. And
Mm-hmm.
I canvassed first in Atlanta, field managed in Denver, Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
ran a canvas in Columbus, Ohio, Chicago, Illinois, Oakland, California.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of this decade, I wound up in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
But I worked in all these Acorn offices with dynamic, energetic, very talented community organizers, basically. I
Okay.
worked alongside unions, and it changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Acorn always had a very, what do you call it, critical analysis of power.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal was to build power for low and moderate income people on a
Yes.
variety of issues: banking, housing, utility rates,
Mm-hmm.
shutoffs, all kinds of things like that.
Yeah. So
So that's
equity. Mm-hmm.
how I got turned on to organizing.
Okay. And so we can see how you began. You took that ad. The technology has changed where you have newspaper ads for jobs. And so we can see how that initial job influenced your practice today. And you talked about how in Georgia, you were one of the key stakeholders supporting this key election. And so, what would you say some of those beginning skills that emerge that you utilize today as we look at challenging and trying to bring about equality for communities that may be disenfranchised?
Well, let's put it this way. Again, that experience of canvassing, um, let's put it this way: people cannot be unafraid to talk to strangers and to try to find the common ground with strangers and what
Mm-hmm.
motivates people's self-interest to get involved
Mm-hmm.
in collective action. And again, I would actually argue I played a small role in the GOTV effort. I ran a canvas last December, literally a year ago at this time. Um, I only had 10 people going door to door in suburban Atlanta getting the vote out. There were Stacey Abrams organizations, the New Georgia Project, Black Voters Matter, NACA, Unite Here, the union. They had thousands of people in the field. And I would just argue being unafraid to knock on doors, ask people to get involved, ask people to vote, do their civic duty. That made all the difference in the world. And that's, again, utilized the skill last year that I learned 40 years ago
Mm-hmm.
by becoming an Acorn canvasser. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Sure. What was your transition from Acorn into social work?
you know what? I had risen from canvasser to field manager to canvas director. And this was my entire experience of organizing was during the Reagan administration,
Yeah.
1980 to 1988, and then the first George Bush administration. Let's put it this way. I was trying to transition into a union organizing job, and my boss at the time didn't like the plan I put out in front. So I actually worked for another organizing group in Louisiana called the Louisiana Coalition for Tax Justice. Did that for about a year. We were organizing against polluters on the Mississippi River that were getting massive tax breaks from the state of Louisiana at the time. But basically, my organizing career kind of wound down, and I always like academia. I got an MSW at Tulane University in 91 and 92. And I had a great educational experience there at Tulane. And it certainly turned me on to more of the clinical side of social work. And I spent 3 years as a correctional clinical social worker at the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola, Louisiana, of all places. But to be honest, working in a prison for 3 years and seeing the level of oppression there, and to be perfectly honest, I felt like the role of social work in prison was more of a cog in a wheel of oppression than it was of liberation.
Mm.
We were obviously trying to make inmates' lives better in that situation. But it was kind of quite an oppressive environment. And again, I don't know if this is good or bad, but that drove me to get a PhD in social work. And when I got my PhD, the world of macro was more appealing than micro for me.
Yes.
So,
and we can see the connection, canvassing door to door, then those engagement skills, and bringing about communities, see what we have in common. And so as we come in masses, we're able to bring about change. And your experience working with those who incarcerated and how they were oppressed, and how sometimes social workers are part of systems that may continue the oppression of individuals because of mistakes or because of injustice in our society. And so we can see the connection between the micro, the macro. And so now you're able to prepare emerging social workers to address real life issues of injustice and equity, and not just to say, well, I'm trying to save someone, but we're trying to look at how can we partner with communities to bring about that desired change in that process. And so we appreciate the work that you're doing. As we look at the challenges, you said you worked at with prison systems. What were some, I guess, grand challenges that you experienced trying to incorporate clinical social worker skills and social work values, and the work that you did prior to that? What were some of the challenges that you encountered? And then some of the, not only challenges, but what were some glimpses of hope that you experienced as partnering with those who are incarcerated?
well, again, and let's put it this way: the woman that ran we had 20 social workers on staff at Angola Penitentiary, and it was part of a reform effort. And to be honest, the only reason any of us had jobs was the inmates sued the state of Louisiana around just having no mental health services, and all of a sudden we had a lot of mental health services. But the biggest challenge, to be perfectly honest, your average client at Angola was hardly ever going to get out of prison. When someone got out, it was a rarity, and usually we got short notice. We were shocked, and to prepare people for life outside of the penitentiary, to be honest, that was not a major part of our job in the prison.
Okay.
So I don't want to. You asked what the challenge was. That was the challenge.
Yes. Yes.
And
I remember one of my organizing campaigns a long time ago was around a young student named Gary Tyler, who was sent to Angola probably for life for something that never really happened on a school bus. It was unbelievable, and the man has been there ever since. It's absolutely a devastating story.
and you know what? That brings up another. I don't want to talk about clinical all day here, but another challenge in the prison was how many people I met that. How would you put it? You could not tell the degree of innocence or guilt with many, many people that we saw there. Just like what Steve's mentioning, it was very, very heartbreaking to see people, with IQs of like 75 or 80, African Americans that if they had had decent legal representation, I guarantee you they would not have been in Angola. No, that was the most upsetting thing of all. So.
Well, it speaks to the transition that it speaks to is why you got involved in the campaign that you did for Warnock and I'm forgetting the other guy's name.
John Ossoff.
Yeah, John Ossoff. Were you able to get other social workers involved in this work?
Yeah, one of the most satisfying things. I ran a small crew of 10 people. 2 of them were social work graduates from our school that canvassed for us. And then 2 of them were current social work students that wanted to make $20 an hour canvassing for 4 hours a night to get out the vote. And in fact, the best canvasser we had was a young African-American undergraduate that was in one of my classes. And I literally I sent my entire class an email saying, if you want a part-time job for the month of December, and you're willing to go door to door during COVID, and I had my mask here earlier, but we went door to door wearing masks. And anyway, one of our star canvassers was one of my current students last fall. So that was very satisfying. They enjoyed it and definitely made a difference.
Yeah, it definitely did. They didn't win by that much, but they won. That's what counted. What was it like in Georgia? Was there a lot of tension? I mean, I imagine there was a lot of tension in that race, both on multiple levels. Did you experience both? You know, I've done canvassing in other years, and so people would be bored, and people would close the door, and then other people would welcome you. But I would imagine it was even much more intense in Georgia, given everything that's going on between 2016 and 2020.
Yeah.
You know what? Let's put it this way. I was only doing this for a month, and it was a nonpartisan GOTV canvass. So the turf I selected was Clayton County, just south of the Atlanta airport. If you've ever flown through Atlanta, Clayton County surrounds the airport there. In the November 3rd election, 85% of that county voted for Biden and the Democrats. So in other words, we picked what was considered fairly Democratic turf, so to speak. And to be honest, there were so many different people going door to door. You either, how would you put it? People either didn't answer the door, they answered the door and they were very friendly and they were happy somebody came by. I think here's one other funny thing about it. We were canvassing during COVID. In the run-up before that election, the November 3rd election, there's very, very little canvassing. The Democrats just didn't think they could do it during COVID. When the runoff hit, everybody changed their tune completely. But I found a number of seniors, they enjoyed someone to talk to because they've been socially isolated for so long. They'd open the door and they'd talk for 30 minutes about whatever you wanted. It was so, in a funny way, we were a social outlet for people that weren't used to chatting with a lot of people. So,
well, it's great to welcome you back, Christy. Dr. Holmes, it's good to see you too, by the way. Are you there, or are you frozen? I think Christy might be frozen.
She's on the screen.
Okay. All right.
I know, but I think it's frozen.
Yes.
Can't tell.
Okay.
How did the school respond to your Georgia State? Was there any pushback one way or another about being involved like this? I mean, a lot of people say we can't do that. So,
well, I did this primarily during the break, essentially. You know, I did. We started at the very end of the semester, and to be honest, the money for this did not come through the school at all. So,
yeah, I'm sure
it was essentially an outside contract. And I mean, here's another fascinating thing. I didn't really plan on this at all, and it was literally a week after the November 3rd election, and we saw the results. There was going to be this big runoff. The chief organizer of Acorn International, Wade Rathke, was in town on some other business. And I was just chatting with him. I said, you know, we ought to put together a little canvas and go out there and try to get some votes. And Wade said, well, send me a budget. Write me out a budget. I spent 30 minutes over lunch coming up with a budget to run a canvas, mainly just paying the canvassers decently. And within 2 days, he raised $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. And he said it was the easiest money he ever raised in his life in organizing. And Wade's been in the business for over 50 years.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was to be, you know, plus with COVID, the university's basically shut down.
Yes.
There was nobody around. So, I mean, I don't want to get into any trouble about all this, but and again, it was a nonpartisan get out the vote canvas.
Yes.
We were not canvassing for Warnock or Ossoff. We were canvassing to get people to go vote.
Yeah.
And that was as plain as day. So
yeah. And so all those skills of community engagement, going door to door, making sure that you're bipartisan, because some schools of social work and many agencies are timid and trying to get out there because of policies and not being able to just ask people to register to vote, and they make an educated decision in that process. And providing community members with forms where they can learn more about all of the representatives that can be a part of the process. And so bringing students and having them part of that process early on is encouraging. I know that they will love to be a part of the process this coming election, and not just because of the attention that media brings to it, because they really care about their community and they're invested in their part of that process. Dr. Holmes, you have any questions?
I'm actually stuck back when you were talking about, I came in and out because I poured hot tea in my lap. But you were talking about when the social workers, you had no mental health services in the prison, and then you had 20 social workers. I was curious about the training of the social workers before they came in. Because I know a lot of our programs in general in social work, it's you're funded or you're not funded. So it's all or nothing, or doors open, doors shut. And a lot of time there's not a lot of training preparation. What was the situation when the 20 social workers came? Did they know what they were coming to do? Did they have any experience? What was your role?
Well, I was actually at the tail end of that consent decree hiring spree. And the woman that ran it, a terrific social worker named Delta Kuczynski, and I believe she got her degree at LSU. And she was talk about someone who could bridge the divide between the discipline of the, the prison officers and the mental health team, and obviously do it in favor of the inmate. She was incredible at doing that. But again, when I was like, I don't know how much turnover there had been before I got hired, but when I was hired, there was literally 20 people already there, and that some of them had been there for a couple of years. And most of the people had gotten their MSWs at LSU. I have no idea if they could take a course in correctional social work there. But the training in Angola, I thought, was very good. You literally shadowed an experienced social worker for practically a month to get trained. So you didn't really do anything on your own until you had gone out and watched someone go down the tier, have a group session. You learn the ropes very, very carefully with the people that were there. So and again,
that was 30 years ago, right?
Yeah, it was. I started in '92 at Angola.
Yeah,
December '92, as I recall.
It would be great if we had that kind of supervision now. A month of shadowing and so on. I mean, that's one of the crises that we confront.
The quality of the supervision makes all the difference in the world. And there was the head of mental health was Delta Kuczynski. There was another guy named Danny, of experienced MSW, calm, collected. These people knew what they were doing, and none of us ever. I don't know. We learned the ropes very well, and it was a good place to learn how to do that kind of social work.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Well, I want to jump back to your students now. Georgia's going to be pivotal in 2022. And there are a lot of signs that things are not looking good. I don't know. Nationally, I don't know what they're like in Georgia, but it would seem like this would be something that social work students would want to be involved in for their own self-interest, that their communities as well as their own jobs are really going to be dependent on whether or not Democrats are elected. So you see much change compared to 2020? Is there do people find this, are they engaged in this, or are they more laid back?
That's an excellent question. To be honest, I wish I could take a sabbatical and do GOTV completely in the fall. I don't think that's a possibility here at Georgia State, but I mean, that's a very good question. Again, out of all my students last year, only 2 current ones and 2 ex-students took the job of canvassing, and they
Right.
were into it and loved it. But as far as one other thing is, I actually supervise the capstone course here called Community Projects, and the problem with that is it's a springtime course, not a fall course.
Right.
in January, we're going to be doing all kinds of projects out in the community. And some of those could be voter registration. In fact, I had applications come in around that issue. And to be honest, no students selected that. So,
Really?
yeah. And so I was disappointed by that. So
Now, why do you think that is? Why do you think I mean, given that, I think the four of us would say, wow, if ever there was a time to be involved, this would be it. And things like voter registration or turning out to vote, or why do you think that is? What is it that they're paying attention to or interested in?
it's funny. I ought to poll the class about why they didn't select that project. And again, because one of the problems is we select projects literally about 4 or 5 months before we actually implement them. So it was September, October of this current semester that they had to select what they were going to do in the spring. And the election wasn't really on people's radar, so to speak. Now that Stacey Abrams has announced, ex-Senator Perdue is going to run against the current incumbent, Brian Kemp, everything is becoming, just a total, lollapalooza in terms of who's going to get what during this the primary election. But overall, I find students are not that into electoral politics. Let's put it that way.
What are they into?
They're into Black Lives Matter. They're into intersectional type organizing. What else did people pick this? They're into child welfare big time. This is macro social work. We have an agency, a multi-alliance agency for children, deal with child protection, deals with kids aging out of foster care, and letting, and it's a grassroots organization. The youth aging out of foster care kind of run the organization in many ways.
Oh, wow.
One of our graduates is the CEO over there. And she has 2 projects this spring where we're trying to get the Board of Regents in Georgia to allow foster youth and kids aging out of foster youth to go to 4-year universities for tuition free.
Mm-hmm.
That's what 8 students selected to work on in the spring. So we have a healthy food initiative project. We've got another group setting up a conference around anti-sex trafficking. That's a big issue that students seem to be attracted to. Fighting against sex trafficking. Atlanta's kind of because we're a transportation hub, we're kind of considered a hotbed for that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, those are some of the things students selected, as opposed to it was going to be registering voters in different locations around the state that was not selected. So
Okay. And so those different areas, I can see how somebody may be gravitated towards the areas because you're able to see outcomes immediately.
Yeah.
And it's not a year or 2-year event. And many times those issues are under discussed, like child welfare. We look at aging out, but what can we do for those young people who want to attend college? And then you talked about sex trafficking. Atlanta, Baltimore, DC, all these are hotbeds. And so what can we do to bring about impact now in the lives of those who are vulnerable and those who are resilient, who have lived experience that we can partner with now. We can actually touch in that process. And so, but there is a connection.
Registration doesn't sound, it's not compelling.
Mm-hmm.
We have to come up with something else, or just what's the point of voter registration? I think that's more where we have to have something more compelling to get those out to help other people register to vote. I don't know, access something, because they're not interested in doing it. It's very boring. It's just getting people to sign up. And I know a lot of the students that come in, they're in the idyllic stage, and they're going to save the world in the best way. but they want to see, I think Gary's right, they want to see immediate results and whatever it is they're doing. And just getting someone registered sounds less in their skill set. So they don't feel very challenged by it. So what is the challenge in getting people to register to vote? Why is it so important that we do that? Why them versus volunteers from any other organization or any other sector? Why us? Why does it matter if we get people to register to vote? And what does it actually mean for the people who are now registered? So I don't think we just do these drives, but a lot of people do the drives. And so it doesn't feel specialized to social work in any way. So it's harder to attract those who are trying to use their skills or increase their skills, if you will.
I mean, that's an excellent point. And in Georgia, Stacey Abrams has created 2 organizations very involved in voter registration: the New Georgia Project, which I mentioned earlier, and Fair Fight, which is more of a legal aspect. They're fighting the voter suppression laws and so forth. But they've really got that turf covered. And I've actually reached out to them to sponsor projects. But to be honest, it's hard for me to get my foot in the door over there. They're, for whatever reason. I've sent them applications, but they've never.
That's a great takeaway, though, that we do that a lot in social work, too, thinking we have to start something new. If there's organizations that already have it going on, we can say they're doing a great job. You should get involved with them. We don't have to make our own. I wish we had that problem in other places.
Yeah. And also making the connection between voter registration and sex trafficking, because those who pass the policies are those who are in place. So making a connection on what can we do to prepare future leaders who have a similar interests, similar values, a similar focus. And so trying to speak to students on making that connection between you may not see the outcomes now, but 2 years later, the work that we do, it will impact our community. So delayed gratification, connection could be a part of the process.
Well, I think part of it too, now that you're pointing that out, it's you want to feel good about yourself and your work. So we have to help students separate that part out, because we're not their voice. That we did a lot of that, a decade or so ago, be the voice of those who don't have a voice. It's returning their voice. How do you help people speak up for themselves and speak up for their communities? We'll give them a vote. And I think a lot of times social workers have the rescue mentality that we're going to solve it for them, rather than showing them how it works in smaller communities, because there are a lot of things that people are voting on, the citizens are voting for, that are very.
We lost you there for a second, Christy.
Did I freeze?
Say it again. I think you froze a little.
Okay.
You got to the point of saying.
Okay. Now I was just saying. Yeah,
you were saying something all over.
Connect for the students, connecting the students back to why they need to be helping people register to vote in their own communities, because they are aware of the issues in their own communities, and they can gather and have a lot of power as a group. Social workers can help inform that, but they can't replace their votes. And that part's really important in order to give power to communities that otherwise don't have them, because we can't just come in and rescue as the social worker.
Yeah.
We can't make more votes or more time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
No, I think that's it's really interesting. I mean, the voter registration is about so many other issues, like you're saying, Gary, to connect it to sex trafficking or any area of equity, and not just registration. As you were saying, Fred, that there are groups out there doing stuff. I think one of the things social work has to do is be connected. It's interesting. You said you've had difficulty connecting to those groups. To me, that would be a real important thing to try to understand what's going on. I mean, frankly, I often find groups, they're also overwhelmed. They're doing so many things in so many ways. It's not like they're sitting around with their feet up. But figuring that out, I think, would be a real important thing, so I think social workers have to see ourselves connected into these campaigns and these other projects, rather than simply separate from them. we're not going to get equity for ourselves and for frontline workers, social workers, if equity isn't happening for all the people we work with.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a connection. There's a connection. Are there any future projects you're working on, Dr. Brooks, that you care to share with our team?
Well, I've had a grant with Feeding America to go out to food pantries and do some surveys of clients, but it's been delayed for 2 years because of COVID.
Okay.
It's completely postponed the data collection.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually completely even changed the research questions and everything on that. But it's very frustrating, to be honest. And I hope we get it. We're supposed to start collecting data, mainly measuring the quality of experience between clients of food pantries that actually can shop for whatever they can select their own food, as opposed to food pantries that only prepackaged boxes and give them to people.
Mm-hmm.
That's become the new research question.
Okay.
Can't they just do a big QR code in the lines? That's what in LA, they've got a lot of those for different reasons. But in the lines where they have the 6 feet apart stickers, there's a big sign with a giant QR code that you can pretty much scan from anywhere in the line. And it goes directly to surveys or your pickup order or whatever it is. It goes directly to the website, which keeps it COVID friendly. You don't have to be face to face for that. But just an idea.
No, well, I'm just a small piece of the puzzle on this thing. The PI is actually at Baylor, a woman in Houston. I'm like a small peon. I'm responsible for collecting data in Atlanta.
No.
And it's actually a big operation in Atlanta. The goal is to do 750 interviews in the spring. So
that doesn't sound so small.
No, that sounds
my idea of small was 7.
Yes.
I've had another idea rolling around for years, but I've never been able to even do a lit review on it. It's the relationship between organizing and people's mental health. If you talk about combining macro and micro, I think I'd actually love to do a lit review on that topic, because everybody I've ever interviewed that was involved in organizing, it was also good for their mental health. They were less depressed. They were more optimistic. They had more energy. And this is both for members and staff, is what I would say. And to be honest, I would say my mental health was better when I was organizing than when I'm sitting around looking at data forever and so forth.
Yeah.
What a great study.
And I think we could empiricize that as well by going out and going to a community that wasn't organized, doing a lot of mental health measures, organize the community and see if those changes over time.
Yeah.
I'd like to be a part. If anybody listening to this podcast wants to be involved in that kind of a study, I'm open to helping write a grant and funding something like that. But to be honest, I haven't even done a lit review on that yet. So
listen, I just looked it up, Fred. There's somebody at our school, a wonderful woman named Anna Ortega Williams. She's got a published paper with a couple of other people, Finding Relief in Action: The Intersection of Youth-Led Community Organizing and Mental Health in Brooklyn. So when you get a chance, look it up. Anna's terrific. And they've really done something along the lines of what you're thinking of, because it really is a great bridge between the macro and micro that could really use a lot more development.
Thank you for that reference. And I will find this paper. If they published something on it?
Yeah. So anyway, this has been terrific. We'd like you to we always wrap up where you get the last word. Gary, anything you want to add before we do, or Christy, before we turn it over to Fred?
Just want to say thank you for your years of service and your ability to connect the micro to the macro, and you're able to prepare emerging social workers and make that connection between voter registration and the inequities that we have today, because there is a connection. There's a connection, a long legacy in America of injustice because of policies, laws, and practices that have been oppressive to women and other marginalized groups in our society. So thank you.
Well, thank you. This has been delightful. And my only advice is what I kind of do in my own classes is tell students, don't be afraid to take a hard look at jobs in social work involved with community and labor organizing, both of those. Because I think you really have to have a power analysis about, who has power and who doesn't. And again, as an organizer, I always take a collective perspective. You got to organize the people most affected by the issue to come together and implement that change. And that's always easier said than done. There's no question about that. And it's always a long road ahead. But I'm still convinced that permanent change happens that way. So.
Thank you. That's terrific. Great way to end. Great to see you, Fred, even if we're not in person.
Yeah, great to see you. The last time I saw you, we were giving you an award for the career achievement in macro social work at ACOSA.
Yeah, that was a few years ago.
The last time we had a face-to-face meeting.
Yeah, it's true.
So
anyway, thanks very much.
Thank you to all y'all. Appreciate
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right.
Take care. Don't hang up.
Okay.